Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping into a real classic, a huge one. Miguel de Cervantes' Don Quixote.
Absolutely. It's quite the undertaking.
Our mission, really, is to look at this, massive 17th century book and figure out what it's still telling us today, especially about that clash between, idealism and just plain reality.
It's crucial, yeah. The sources we looked at really hammer this home. It's not just some funny adventure story from ages ago. It's often called, the first modern novel.
Right. Foundational.
It totally shifted how we think about stories, about characters, even about truth itself.
So let's set the scene. It starts with this guy, Alonso Quijano. He's a middle-aged gentleman.
Mancha, yeah. And he gets completely obsessed with reading these old chivalric romance novels.
Like tales of knights and quests and all that.
Exactly. And he reads so many, he kind of loses touch with reality. Snaps, you could say.
And this delusion takes over. He decides he's a knight-errant, renames himself Don Quixote de la Mancha.
Yep. And his big plan, to bring back knight-errantry, to find justice and honor in a world that's pretty cynical by then.
Which is just wild. So, okay, let's unpack this a bit. If it's basically about a guy who's, let's face it, delusional, pursuing these impossible dreams, what can you, listening now, actually get from this old Spanish satire?
Oh, so much. I mean, it really forces you to grapple with, what's more important, being practical or holding on to some kind of ideal, even if it seems crazy. That tension is everything.
Okay, let's dig into the quest itself. It's famously absurd from the get-go, right? His preparation.
Oh, totally. It's quite pathetic, really. He finds some rusty old family armor, patches it up.
And his horse, Rocinante, described as basically a nag, a skinny old horse.
But in his mind, a noble steed. And his mission, he thinks it's about justice and glory for his imagined lady, Dulcinea.
Who he's never actually met, right?
Right. She's an idealized peasant girl.
Yeah.
But every single thing he does is completely out of sync with the real world around him.
And you can't really talk about Quixote without his sidekick.
Absolutely not. Sancho Panza is crucial. Quixote basically convinces Sancho, who's just a local farmer, pretty simple guy.
Promises him an island to govern, doesn't he?
Yeah, that's the lure. And this pair immediately sets up the novel's core conflict. You've got Quixote, who's all idealism, imagination, the mind living in this should-be world.
And then Sancho?
Sancho is pure common sense. He's realism embodied. He's worried about practical things, food, getting paid, not getting beaten up. He's the body, the grounding force.
It's like the ultimate odd couple. One's head is literally in the clouds. The other's feet are firmly, maybe reluctantly, on the ground.
Pretty much.
And we absolutely have to talk about the windmills. That's probably the image everyone knows.
You have to, yeah. It's iconic for a reason.
Here.
He genuinely, truly believes these windmills are monstrous giants that he, as a knight, is duty-bound to fight.
He charges them on Rocinante.
He does, gets knocked flat, of course. But what's really interesting is how the sources break that down. Even in that moment of peak absurdity, charging a piece of farm equipment, his intention is noble. He thinks he's fighting evil, cleansing the world. It's misplaced, obviously, but the motive comes from a desire for justice.
Okay, I see that. He means well, even if he's completely wrong about, everything. But doesn't that make the lesson a bit tricky? Like, where's the line between admirable dreaming and just dangerous delusion?
That's the genius of it. That's the question Cervantes is constantly poking at. The book seems to suggest that the world itself, 17th century Spain, moving towards this sort of harsh pragmatism, is so lacking in real honor and meaning.
That you almost have to be delusional to even try?
Sort of, yeah. That maybe pursuing ideals in such a world requires a break from reality. The line isn't fixed, it shifts. And Cervantes leaves it up to you, the reader, to judge.
Okay, that leads us nicely into this whole idea of reality versus illusion. Cervantes isn't just telling a funny story about a madman. He's really exploring how we as humans kind of build our own realities, right?
Exactly. Quixote's madness isn't just a character quirk. It symbolizes that fundamental human tension. The world as it is versus the world as we think it should be. Practicality versus, idealism.
And you mentioned the Quixote-Sancho dynamic earlier. How does that play into this blurring of lines?
Well, they start as opposites, right? Dreamer and realist, mind and body. But the amazing thing, the revolutionary thing for its time, is they don't just stay in their boxes.
They influence each other.
Profoundly. The narrative starts to subtly merge their worlds.
Can you give an example? Because that sounds like where the real depth is.
Sure. Take those roadside inns. To Quixote, they aren't just shabby taverns, they're castles. He demands to be treated like a knight.
And people just laugh at him.
At first, maybe. But then something interesting happens. The innkeepers, the serving girls, they realize he's, well, off his rocker. But they often start playing along. For amusement, sure, but they do it. They call him my lord. They participate in his fantasy knighting ceremony.
So his perception actually starts to bend the reality around him?
Yes. It's not just internal. His utter conviction forces others, at least temporarily, into his world. They step into the roles he assigns them.
Wow, so his madness isn't contained. It actually ripples outwards and changes how others behave, maybe even gives their mundane lives a bit of drama.
Precisely. And look at Sancho's journey. He starts out purely motivated by greed, that promised island. He's cynical.
Just wants the paycheck, basically.
Right. But as they travel, as he witnesses Quixote's unwavering, if insane, commitment to his code, Sancho changes. He starts picking up Quixote's fancy, archaic language. He starts defending his master's craziness to others.
Really, the pragmatist starts defending the madness.
He does, and that island governorship. It becomes less about the reward and more about, well, loyalty, about a shared sense of purpose, however strange. He gets, as critics say, Quixotized. He starts to believe in the dream, just a little.
That's a fascinating transformation. The realist gets pulled into the fantasy. Okay, and this leads to something even more complex the sources mention, metafiction.
Ah, yes. This is where Cervantes gets incredibly modern, incredibly clever.
Explain that. Metafiction. It sounds academic.
It just means the story refers to itself as a story. It breaks that illusion of reality, the fourth wall. Cervantes is a master of this, way ahead of his time.
How does he do it in Don Quixote?
Okay, so part 1 comes out in 1605, and it's a huge hit. 10 years later, Cervantes publishes part 2. Now, here's the kicker. In part 2, the characters Quixote, Sancho, and others they meet have actually read part 1.
Wait, what? Characters in the book know about the book they're in?
Exactly. They talk about it. They know Don Quixote is famous because of the book. People they encounter recognize them from the story and sometimes mess with them based on what they read in part 1.
That is mind-bending for the 1600s, so they're aware of their own fictional status.
In a way, yes. It's incredibly sophisticated. Cervantes is playing with layers of reality, the nature of fame, how stories shape perception. It makes you question what's real even within the fiction.
And that's a big part of why it's called the first modern novel.
That's a huge part. That self-awareness, combined with the deep evolving psychology of the characters, especially how Quixote and Sancho change, and the use of multiple narrative voices commenting on the story, it just blew the doors off what novels usually did back then.
Which was more about, what, idealized heroes and predictable plots?
Pretty much. Chivalric romances had formulas. Heroes were perfect. Quests were straightforward. Cervantes threw in dirt, confusion, hunger, failure, humor based on flawed humanity. That shift towards messy psychological realism is fundamental.
It really does sound groundbreaking. Let's talk more about that legacy. Part 1 in 1605, Part 2, 1615. We know it was a sensation. What specifically was Cervantes taking aim at with his satire?
He was directly mocking those chivalric romances we mentioned. They were still wildly popular, but he saw them as unrealistic, maybe even harmful in their outdated ideals.
So he introduces Quixote, who takes them literally, to show how absurd they are in the modern world.
Precisely. He injects realism, chaos, consequences. His characters get bruised, they get hungry, they get mocked. They aren't just symbols, they feel like, well, people, albeit eccentric ones. And this approach, the irony, the psychological depth, the questioning of reality, had a massive impact.
On other writers, you mean?
Huge impact. Thinkers and writers like Dostoevsky, Kafka, Borges, they all saw Don Quixote as this towering achievement, a masterclass in irony, in exploring the human condition.
And that influence clearly lasts. Even today, just the name Don Quixote means something specific, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's shorthand for a dreamer, often in a slightly mocking way, but also admiringly. Someone who chases impossible ideals, who tilts at windmills.
It speaks to anyone who sort of challenges the status quo, even if they fail.
Exactly. Anyone trying to live authentically by their own code, despite what the world thinks. That resonates.
But the concrete legacy is there, too. You mentioned the musical.
Right. Man of La Mancha, which took this complex satirical novel and pulled out that core theme of striving, giving us to dream the impossible dream. That song's universality shows how deeply Quixote's quest taps into something fundamental.
And the book itself? Still widely read?
Immensely. Translated into, over 60 languages, it proves that the struggle Quixote embodies, that fight between the ideal and the real, is something people everywhere connect with. We all know what it feels like to face a windmill.
That image, charging the windmill, it's a great pivot. Let's try and boil down some practical takeaways. What are the key aha moments you, listening, can grab from all this?
Okay, well, drawing from the sources, the first big one comes from Quixote's drive. Regardless of how misguided it seems, let's call it lesson 1. Dream boldly.
Even if your dream is unconventional.
Especially then. The book suggests having that passion, that sense of purpose, even a wacky one, is more vital, maybe more human, than just playing it safe or seeking everyone's approval. Quixote gets beaten up, yeah, but he's never bored. He has a mission.
And he keeps going, right? Despite constant failure and physical pain.
He does, which leads straight into lesson 2. There's dignity in the struggle. Think about all the times he fails, gets knocked down, looks ridiculous. The sources really highlight this.
It's like getting trampled by sheep he thinks are armies.
Exactly. Or tossed in a blanket at an inn. But even when utterly defeated, he clings to his code, his vision. The lesson isn't about winning. It's that the persistence itself, the striving against the odds, that's where the heroism lies. That's what gives life meaning, maybe more than easy success.
Okay, bold dreams, dignity in trying. What was the third one? It feels like it has to connect back to that reality illusion thing.
It does. Lesson 3. Perception shapes reality. We talked about how Quixote imposes his view on the world.
Turning inns into castles in his mind.
Right. His delusion acts almost like a shield, transforming a pretty grim, mundane world into one where, for him at least, nobility and adventure are still possible.
Yeah.
Now, we probably shouldn't detach from reality that much.
Probably not.
But the core idea holds. The story you tell yourself about your life, your circumstances, that narrative can change how you experience the world. It can help you find meaning and dignity even when things look bleak.
Finding dignity in the dirt, as you said earlier, that really brings us toward the end of the story itself. He eventually goes home, right?
He does. The sources describe how at the very end, Don Quixote returns home, quite broken physically and mentally. He falls ill, and on his deathbed, he actually regains his sanity.
He becomes Alonso Quijano again.
Yes. He renounces all the knight-errantry stuff, calls it foolishness, apologizes to Sancho, makes his will, and then dies peacefully.
Wow. So he dies. Sane.
Sane, yes. And it's an incredibly powerful, really bittersweet ending. It delivers the final lesson, perhaps, that laughter and tragedy are intertwined.
Joy and pain, hope and delusion.
Exactly. And that brief moment of sanity before death forces us to ask, was he happier as the mad knight or the sensible gentleman? The book doesn't give an easy answer. The ultimate message seems to be about finding meaning and dignity within that messy, contradictory reality, that harsh and unromantic world, as the sources put it, knowing that both the dream and the practical world come with their own costs.
So that whole journey from ordinary Alonso through the extraordinary madness of Don Quixote and back again cements him as this enduring symbol. It's a reminder to maybe reach for something higher, even if it looks absurd, but maybe also keep enough perspective to laugh at yourself along the way. Stay grounded, but don't lose the dream entirely.
Well put. And that final twist, him dying right after regaining his sanity, leaves us with a really provocative question to chew on, something for you to consider. The whole book is set up as this brilliant satire, right?
Yeah.
Mocking those old-fashioned chivalric ideals. But if the hero finds sanity, renounces his quest, and immediately dies, what is Cervantes subtly suggesting? Does the world in some way actually need that noble delusion? That impossible striving, even if it ends in failure, is becoming purely sane and practical, actually a kind of death for the human spirit?
Is sanity overrated if it means giving up the quest?
Maybe. Something to think about the next time you're facing what feels like an insurmountable giant.
A fascinating thought to end on. Until next time.